Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kaylee and today we are back on my island Rubble for another speed build video. If you're new, Rubble is my post-apocalyptic island, and after today's build we'll be almost halfway through the island, so make sure to check out the other builds we've completed so far. But today you can probably guess what we're building based on this villager's house, but we are making a very overgrown and abandoned cemetery or graveyard. This build was super fun to make, so let's get right into it. Today's build will be in this little red square on the map, which is actually a pretty decent chunk of the island. When I was building this area it felt kind of small, but we are making some decent progress on this island so far. Alright, we're going to start this build out with some pathing. This build will have a main path that forks off into a few different directions. We have two villager houses in this area, and then I also want a piece of the path to head straight to the back of the island to lead into the build that we have planned for this back section of our island. And I like that this area was kind of small, but I was still able to fit two villager houses in without it feeling too squished. I chose Lucky to be one of the villagers for the obvious reason, and I also decided to place Avery here. I feel like he looks like kind of like a spooky bird, and it reminded me a lot of a vulture. I know vultures don't tend to hang around graveyards, but they usually stay around dead animals to eat, so I thought it was a little fitting. But after today's build, we're going to be pretty close to halfway through this island, so now I need to start actually planning out where I'm going to be fitting all the houses and buildings. And I've actually been thinking of just leaving the shops and maybe the museum on the beaches because they don't really fit the abandoned or post-apocalyptic theme too well. They just look too new, and I guess the smaller version of Nook's Cranny looks a little bit more run down, but it has a big blue roof, which doesn't really match the color scheme I'm going for on this island. And I don't really want a big block of blue in the middle of my very color-coordinated island. I also had an idea for using the museum in a build on my island, but again it just looks too nice and new and not abandoned enough, so I probably will just slap it on the beach somewhere. But I do have all the spots for my villager houses in my own house planned out, so that's progress. But right now in the build I'm working on placing some of the gravestones around. I'm scattering these around as I think it helps with the abandoned feel of this area. This will also help later on when I go to place the wheat fields to get a more natural look to what is a normally very boxy item. Back to talking about the villagers, I'm also debating whether I want to remodel the inside of the villagers' houses to fit the island. I much prefer to do the outdoor decorating in Animal Crossing, but when I visit an island I love when they decorate the villagers' homes. So let me know in the comments if you think I should decorate the villagers' homes, or if I should just leave them be. Circling back to this build, like I said before, I want this graveyard to look very overgrown and abandoned, so we will be using a lot of wheat fields. I was very determined to use them in this build and to have them look good because this is one of the items that for some reason I feel like I can never get to look good in a build. But I wanted to challenge myself to use them as the main item used in this build, so here we are. And after making an entire build using this item, the one major complaint I have is that we cannot move them easily. Like most placed items in Animal Crossing, you can just grab to push around, but for some reason we cannot do that with the wheat field item, and I was on the verge of going crazy trying to place these in the right spot. I did however develop a little technique that I think kind of worked to make them look a little bit more natural. Basically I just staggered the wheat fields in all directions, and I layered them with any of the placed items or the trees and shrubs. And I think this helped to make them look a little less blocky. And when I first came up with the idea for this build, I was debating whether I wanted to use the wheat fields or if I just wanted to use a bunch of overgrown weeds. But I like the wheat field item a little bit more because you can place them on the half tiles unlike the weeds. So this gave me a little bit more design freedom when it came to placing and staggering all of the gravestones as well. And if you watch my island tour video of the Island of Exposure, you can see I took some tips from Bela's graveyard. So in my graveyard, I'm using a bunch of different types of items to use of the gravestones. So here I'm using the Western style stone, the Zen style stone, and the tablets all as the graves. And throughout the build, I will also be using a bunch of other rock and stone items as well to carry that stone look throughout. I also decided to keep the color scheme of this area similar to the one that I used in the infected mushroom forest build. So sticking with the darker neutral colors and leaving out the brighter yellows and greens. For this island, I think I want the more natural areas to be the darker color palette, and then for the more industrial or city-like parts to include those pops of color. And since we are almost halfway through this island, I have been thinking of some other themes for my next island. I still have my second island that I'm working on, which is Gardenia, but I want to keep 2 islands going at the same time. I do have a few island themes that I've been looking forward to, and one of them is the grunge graffiti city. I know it's kind of similar to this island, but for the city aspect, I would want the island to be a little bit more structured with actual linear streets throughout. Another thing that I recently have been obsessed with is an all black and white kidcore island. I found this set of codes on Pinterest and immediately fell in love with them, so I was trying to think of an island that I could incorporate these on, and a black and white kidcore island just felt right, and I think it would be a super cool and fun challenge. Both of these themes are on the darker side, and I do think I want to keep to having one island as a darker and creepier side, and then one island to be super fun and colorful. Now, after having worked on the graveyard for a bit, I switched my focus over to Avery's side of this build. I wanted to keep the same feeling of this area over here, but it's a smaller area and there wasn't a whole lot of space to add more graves, so I just kept it to be a little bit more natural. And I think it's a good mix between our new graveyard and our existing mushroom forest that's on the other side of this fence. I also ended up using the Stonehenge item over in this area, and I actually love how it looks when it's turned around. It's a nice big item that can fill this weird little gap between Avery's house and the river mouth. I did have to end up pushing Lucky out of the way and trap him on the beach, but I think it's worth it with how good this item looks here. Now working on the left side of the graveyard, and I'm adding this simple well because I think it's an amazing item and underappreciated. I know I already added the brick well over next to the pathway, but I think the wells are just kind of creepy and they match the stonework look of this build, so I think using 2 is okay. But as for the build, I'm continuing to go in and layer the wheat fields with the other gravestones and adding in a few more trees and shrubs. I do add more of the nature items on the left side of this build because I eventually want to densen up this area with a bunch of trees next to this build in order to separate this area from the area I have planned to go behind our train tracks. And I don't want you to be able to walk between the 2 builds, so I will be using a bunch of trees and shrubs to block off and separate the 2 areas. I also did decide to border this whole area off with fencing. Looking back on this, I might actually remove the fencing, but my thought process was that it was kind of hard for me to block off the area to the left with all the wheat fields since you can just walk through them, and I thought it would be weird to just have a line of trees and bushes because it seemed like it would be unnatural, and we already had the fencing in front of the graveyard, so it would kind of look like the fencing just went all the way around the graveyard to keep people out. And then to continue with the idea that this has been abandoned and run down, I tried to mix up the fencing with the corrugated iron fence as well. And the area next to Lucky's house on the right side was looking a little empty, so I'm just going in with some trees and shrubs, and I do hide a little creepy skeleton back here as well. And then to finish off this build, I'm going in and adding a few more wheat fields and other natural items like flowers, weeds, and bushes just to densen up and fill in this space on the left side. And here's the final build. But that's the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching. Before you leave, make sure to give the video a like, comment, and to subscribe to the channel. If you watch to the end, let me know which villager is your least favorite and why. Bye, friends!